The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
George Lopez bashes the bad dad, and when a comedy club owner takes a stand, it was no laughing matter in that courtroom, folks. Hello, I'm James Curtis, and welcome to E's exclusive coverage of the Michael Jackson trial. Now, today, unfortunately, as I'm sure you've heard, we begin on a sad note. Yesterday afternoon, famed trial attorney Johnnie Cochran died. He died of an inoperable brain tumor. He was 67 years old. Best known for his defense of O.J. Simpson, along with other celebrities, Johnnie Cochran was also a champion for the less fortunate, the no-Jays, as he liked to call them, a leader for positive change in his community. Cochran might have been surprised by the number of tributes and outpouring of love and affection following his death, but you shouldn't be, Johnny. The praise fits, Johnny. It fits. Understandably, our colleague Sean Chapman Holley, the current managing partner of the Johnnie Cochran law firm, will not be joining us today. We send our condolences to Sean Chapman Holley, to the Cochran family, and to all those who called him their friend. And to those of us who didn't know them well, I speak for myself in particular, and those others who never even had a chance to meet him, but nevertheless find themselves affected by him, he will also be missed. Howard, Ricky, you both had long-standing relationships with him. I didn't. For my part, I knew him. He was always very nice to me when I met him. But I also was moved, rocked. I had to literally stop walking. I got a phone call, and that's how I found out.
Johnnie Cochran and I co-hosted a show together for a year, and I think it was one of the more extraordinary years of my life because of who Johnnie is. Johnnie was someone who had a spiritual soul. He had a goodness. He celebrated life. He made every person around him feel terrific. Johnnie would always say, "That's great. You look great. Isn't that great?" And Johnnie had an infectious personality, and he wanted the world to be a better place. You know, I've thought about this a lot in the last 12 to 24 hours, and one of the things that I think of, and I know Howard has known him decades longer than I have, is that Johnnie Cochran celebrated the joy of life every day. And I think what we do in his memory is we celebrate his life.
Yeah, absolutely. Howard?
Hard for me. I knew Johnny Lee, as I like to refer to him, for 40 years. We went to adjoining high schools. We kind of grew up in the same neighborhood. And I knew him from the first year I began to practice. I tried cases with him as co-counsel, difficult cases. We won most. We lost some. He was a wonderful individual. He had great instincts. He was smart. He understood people. He could communicate with jurors. Just fabulous. It was a pleasure to work with him. He was a team player. You traded off strategies. You worked together. You decided how you were going to cross-examine witnesses. And what was wonderful about Johnny is he really understood the community that we grew up in. He understood his place in it, and he did everything possible, in my opinion, to create a better environment and atmosphere for the community. My condolences to Dale and to the kids, and to Mr. Cochran, as I always refer to his father as.
His father is so wonderful.
He's the greatest.
You know,
He's the greatest.
One of the things that I think that we should think about Johnny for is, in the world in which we live, in this legal world, as we look at scenes from courtrooms, is the reality of Johnny being able to be loved by all sides, the judges, the clerks, the prosecutors, the people on the other side, because he was a man of grace.
And we're going to talk about Johnnie Cochran's enormous effect and his mark throughout our analysis of the Michael Jackson trial today. He even left a mark on that trial with that settlement that he headed up as the defense team for Michael Jackson with respect to one of the previous alleged prior bad acts. Well, back in Santa Maria, it was business as usual as the Michael Jackson team arrived for court yet one more day. I believe we're on day 22, folks. Under questioning by Assistant District Attorney Ron Zonin, here's what television star George Lopez told the jurors, according to the courtroom transcripts.
What was the nature of the fundraiser that you were going to do, and where?
I was going to do a fundraiser and use the radio to raise money for Gavin, and I was going to do it at the Ice House in Pasadena. And I was going to take care. I was going to do it myself. I was going to plan the whole thing. And because of my schedule at the radio, we kind of got a little behind. And David became, pretty aggressive about when it was going to happen and how much he thought we could raise and that kind of stuff.
What do you mean by pretty aggressive?
A lot of phone calls, a lot of, when's it going to happen? And I said, I'm working right now, man. We're trying to put it together. We're trying to get guys to perform. And every call was about the same thing.
Did he always inquire about the money that you would raise?
Yes, he did.
Did he ask you about specific amounts?
Yeah, he did. He asked about how much I thought we could raise.
What did you tell him?
I told him that with those things, you never know. I mean, you never know how much you're going to raise. And really, when I do fundraisers, it was never about how much money do you think you could raise. It was about getting it off successfully. It wasn't about the bottom line. It was about doing a fundraiser.
Next, hopping jalapenos, Batman tempers flair at a Mexican restaurant.
You've dealt with other benefits for other people in need, have you not?
Yes, I have.
Was there something unique about David's behavior as compared to the others?
Yeah. I mean, the guy was like, it was more than one call. It was always about the same thing. And he'd call while I was on the radio, while I was at working. I couldn't talk to him. And after a while, I told my wife Ann that it was becoming apparent to me that it wasn't a good idea to have the fundraiser. I decided not to do it because I didn't like the way it was kind of turning out.
Was there a particular event that occurred that put you over the top on this, made you decide not to do it?
Yes.
What was that?
On May 5th of that year, I think 2000, whatever the year, 2000, I think. To the best of my knowledge, it's 2000. I was doing a show at the Acapulco restaurant on May 5th from 5 to 10 in the morning in El Monte. And at 10 o'clock, he approached me outside of the restaurant, right in front of the restaurant, and asked me aggressively what was the deal with the fundraiser. And I told him that I didn't think it was going to happen. And he said, "What do you mean it's not going to happen?" And I said, "It doesn't look like it's going to happen." And then his tone changed, and we had words. And that was the last time I ever saw him.
Did he ever call you again thereafter?
No.
Howard Weitzman, the big elephant in this room, and actually it's going to become realized in this room based on the judge's ruling a couple of days ago. The prior bad acts, we started off talking about Johnny Cochran on his passing. He was at the helm of the 1993 case that settled. In hindsight, that certainly is questionable given what's going to happen in this trial with respect to that, and it makes this bad dad theory have a little bit more weight, doesn't it?
Well, I think the bad dad theory, we have to see how he testifies. We have to see what the mother says, but certainly it's something to deal with. With respect to the 1993 case, it was Johnny and I involved in that defense, and what bothers me most about the settlement is whatever it was and whyever it was done, it's not an admission of guilt. Big red neon letters with respect to that settlement. And to let the settlement into this trial changes the whole mix.
Yeah, it does. But, Ricky, with respect to that, it is indeed changed. And the bad dad theory taking the legs out from Mesereau, saying it's mom, it's mom, it's mom, it's dad, it's dad, it's dad.
It's very problematic on both sides. I think that Howard, just like the rest of us who like to consider ourselves good lawyers who say, put a case to rest, let's get rid of this case, go on with your life, never dream that 10 years, 12 years later, it's going to pop up in the middle of a criminal case. It's just not within our consciousness. So putting that to one side and going down to bad dad, Tom Mesereau was very clear about his theory of the case. And that theory of the case is these kids were under the influence of a greedy, grifting mom. And she is separated and then divorced from dad. And every one of these government witnesses who dealt with mom and dad says mom was quiet, mom was not asking, and dad was the conniving one.
James, here's the real issue, and Ricky touched on it yesterday. It's Mr. Mesereau's credibility as well.
Yes.
When jurors sit in judgment, a lot depends on the lawyer and how they feel about the lawyer.
And a lot of attorneys will tell you, and jurors will tell you, I like the attorney, therefore I believed what they were telling me. Next, defense attorney Tom Mesereau, speaking of likable individual, cross-examined George Lopez, who describes a don't call us, we'll call you relationship with the accuser's family.
At some point, your wife confronted David about his constant requests for money, right?
That's right.
Okay. And he got kind of nasty, didn't he?
He did.
Okay, were you there?
I was not there.
Okay, but you heard about it.
I did.
And that sort of started a downhill slide in your relationship with the whole family, right?
Yes, sir.
At some point, you cut off all relationships with that family, correct?
That's true.
And you called off any work that you were doing on the benefit?
That's right.
All right. I think you said David tried to repeatedly call you at the radio station, right?
That's correct.
Did you take his calls?
I did not.
Okay. Did you tell anybody to tell them, stop the calls?
Well, he called usually when we were on the air, but I wasn't going to take the call after his conversation with my wife.
Now, Howard, one of the legacies of Johnny Cochran has to be with respect to judges. I can't tell you, and having worked at Court TV, Ricky, you know this to be true as well. Every judge's first reaction with respect to the prospect of cameras in the courtroom is, I don't want to be like Judge Ito. This judge, you say he's got the tread on the tracks, but how's he doing overall in terms of managing this courtroom?
Well, he's managing the courtroom very well. He has complete control. In my opinion, much too much control. I think he's made, as we'll see later on today, some rulings that are just wrong.
Yeah.
What judges that take control of a courtroom like this do is they manipulate, in my opinion, how jurors look at the lawyers.
Well,
very important.
Very important because the judge sits up on that altar. I mean, the judge is the person at the top, and the jurors, we know from Jury Project studies, take their direction from that judge.
Yes.
And when they sense the judge likes something or someone, it spills over onto the jury.
Conversely, when they sense the judge disapproves, there is a jury instruction, though the judges read in the state of California that deals with that. We'll get to more of that later on. When we return, testimony from the man caught in the middle of this melee. Stay with us.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. When George Lopez is engaged in serious testimony about an alarming event, he can still get a laugh. Under cross-examination, here's what Lopez told jurors according to the courtroom transcripts.
David tried to make you feel guilty about not helping Gavin at that point, didn't he?
Yes, at that point of May 5th, he did.
And you told him basically he's an extortionist, correct?
I did.
That wasn't a pleasant conversation, was it?
It was not.
Okay.
And I don't use big words like that, you know?
Yeah. All right, now, after you called him an extortionist, what happened next?
You know, it was a pretty heated exchange. And after that, he left. And, you know, I got to be honest with you, after that, I had no conversations with Gavin or any of the after May 5th of that day.
You then learned at some point from Jamie Masada that Jamie had given David some money, supposedly to make up for what he claimed was lost from the son's wallet?
That's right.
And the implication was that you had taken it?
That I had taken it.
And you never took a thing, right?
I did not.
Were you upset with Masada that he would even pay him something?
I was. Yeah, I was.
Did you complain to Masada?
I did. I said, how could you do that?
Okay, and he basically said to you he wanted to make peace, or words to that effect?
Words to that effect.
Well, under redirect examination by Assistant District Attorney Ron Zonin, George Lopez's recollection of the accuser's father do not get any more flattering.
What were your reasons for cutting off the other members of the family besides David?
Was, you know, that the guy was aggressively trying to get money from me. And when I cut him off, you know, the rest of the family followed. I wasn't going to talk to Gavin behind his father's back. And, you know, the altercation we had May 5th, he used that, you know, against me. Because I said to him, you know, I've only tried to help you. And he said, you've helped me? And at that point, it was just, you know, kind of the wind went out of my sails. And then he said, what am I supposed to tell Gavin? And I said, tell him his father's an extortionist.
Was there anything that Davelin, Starr, or Janet did to contribute to your cutting off the family or your attention?
No.
And here it is, Ricky, squarely in the camp of the defense theory. Now, fortunately for most defense attorneys, usually it happens the other way around. The prosecution marries itself to some theory,
Yes.
either too narrow or too broad, and gives the defense way too much of a target to hit at. But
well,
not here.
Not here, because what
Yet.
happened was Tom Mesereau, which, by the way, I approve of making a detailed opening statement with your theory of the case, because I think that's the most opportune time to persuade a jury. So I don't quarrel with Tom Mesereau marrying himself to a theory. The problem is his theory has backfired because he was very clear and he counted on the testimony of that father. There is no doubt about it. One of the things, I'm curious also what Howard has to think, though, is Mesereau winds up in a laughter situation with George Lopez about the father. And I think laughter can help a defense lawyer become more lovable to the jury.
Yeah, I think it's very important. It kind of endears you to the jury, even if it's a witness that isn't giving you the best testimony possible. And speaking of Johnny, that's what he used to do, or we used to try and do. We used to talk about that. What I'm confused, Tom Mesereau must have known some of this information about David. And in retrospect now, as I look at the way he's postured the case, it clearly appeared to be the family total. And he still could have used, that's right, he still could have used David's testimony at the end, but he should have painted the picture of the family.
Me thinks that he probably interviewed David, and David may have told him a story that didn't quite
come out. And
I have no basis in fact. It's
That's why she was good.
Absolutely. Top 10 in the country, was it? That's what it was.
Five.
Oh, excuse me. I
always thought it was the top.
You know, there you go. Anyway, we move along. Next, the state calls Jamie Masada. He's the owner of the Laugh Factory Comedy Club here in Los Angeles. Masada helped the accuser's family when the boy was gravely ill. On direct examination, he tells Assistant District Attorney Ron Zonin how he was caught between a rock and a hard place.
At some point in time, did you have a falling out with David?
Not really. I never had a fallout with him.
All right. Was there an incident that took place involving a wallet? A conversation with him about a wallet?
Yes.
All right. What was that?
It was the first time happened. It was in my club. He came in my office one time, and I remember precisely that whole thing because I did not have money, cash in my pocket. He came in my office and he said that Gavin went to George's house and somehow he left his wallet with $350 in it in George's house. He lost it in George Lopez's house. And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Gavin, this happened?" And Gavin didn't say anything. And I just kind of like, "Gavin, this happened?" He said, "No." I said, "And David near Gavin," and he said, "Tell him that happened." And Gavin didn't say anything, and my phone rang, and I tried to pick up on the phone, and then I realized Gavin said, "Oh, Dad," like some kind of like David elbowed Gavin or something. And I knew that Gavin's face got all red, like the time David hit him, his face was red, and Dad, and something like that. And at that point I said, wait a minute, guys, come on, what was it, 350? Whatever, I wrote him a check. I said, "Here is the check, go, here." I gave him a check for $350. I said, "Don't even mention it. First, the money was from me. I gave you guys the money. Don't even get that." Because I got really upset because this kid is sick. He elbowed him or something. I didn't see what's happened. But I could see from the face of the kid, he did something to him.
All right, unlike the actor playing the accuser, that is Jamie Masada. No, I'm just kidding, but he's doing a very good job, isn't he? So, is it possible for this dad to sound any worse?
On one of the two occasions that you were having a benefit at the Laugh Factory...
Yes, sir.
Did you have an argument with David, or did he have an argument with you?
Not really. I don't recall argument.
Did he ever throw money on the floor?
Oh, one time. The second, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was the second time that the money I gave, we did a fundraising for David, and we went upstairs, and somehow he was downstairs collecting the money, and we went upstairs giving the money to David, And David, all of a sudden, we gave him the money, and I asked him about, again, one more time about, because Gavin was up there, and somebody was there. I don't recall who was there. Somebody was, few people that were up there, they asked me about the wallet. Somehow the wallet came up, and David was trying to tell Gavin to talk about the wallet. And Gavin did not want to say anything about it. He said he did not know what the wallet he's talking about. And because of, he wasn't, kid was not confirming what he was saying. And he threw the money at me. And I'm kind of like, you know, I was kind of like insulted. I say how appreciated person he is. So I started walking away.
Ricky Kleeman, this is Jamie Masada, the man primarily responsible for putting the accuser and Michael Jackson together, introducing them to.
Indeed so. And I will say this, as I am wont to say, a trial is a living, breathing thing.
Yeah.
It morphs every day, and sometimes it favors one side and then favors the other. This testimony is devastating for Michael Jackson. Devastating. Because what we have here is Jamie Masada, who seems to be a rather likable guy, showing that this kid does not want to lie, does not want to fib, does not want to make up a story, while his dad is literally elbowing him on the story about defrauding George Lopez. This is a bad day for the defense.
Now, let me play the defense advocate. Ooh, that hurts. Let me play the defense advocate, Howard, and say that although what Ricky says is a very good point for the prosecution, it would appear so based on this testimony, isn't the theory of the defense with respect to the accuser that now, once this accuser becomes disenchanted with Michael Jackson, feels that Michael Jackson is about to abandon him, he changes his attitude?
Yes, I'm not so sure this testimony is quite as bad for Michael Jackson as Ricky indicates, but I'll say this again. I'm not certain why this testimony is coming in when it is. David hasn't testified yet, but what Mr. Zonin has managed to do is take the testimony away from David for a moment and, in effect, vouch for Gavin's character.
Yes.
That's what he's done here.
And does that now, vouching for the character, as traditionally happens in courtrooms and as we were trained in law school, does that now open the door for even more assaults on the character of the young accuser? When we return, everything gets uglier. No, not us, folks, but the evidence of violence, plus a rough and tumble cross-examination. I made Howard laugh. That's a good thing. Stay with us.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. LA Comedy Club owner Jamie Masada is on the stand. He continues his testimony and he hits on an incident of vital importance as he recounts a conversation with the accuser's mother. And while Howard is grimacing, here's what the jury heard according to the courtroom transcripts.
She said, "They're holding me here with my kid against my will. I need to get out of here. Please do something." I said, "Why don't you call the police? We talked about all kind of stuff like that. You want to..."
Hold it. Next question.
All right. Did you make an effort to introduce her to a lawyer?
Yes, I did.
And who was the lawyer that you introduced her to?
Bill Dickerman.
All right. Do you remember what that was?
It was after the Martin Bashir taping was going on. The people, they were calling Gavin all kind of bad names. And I took her to, and the kid to Bill Dickerman to stop, if they can stop. ABC was running it, VH1 was showing his picture, MTV, all of them. The way I understood, everybody was showing his picture. And the people, they recognized him and they would call him bad names. And he was really upset. And we were going to try to see if Bill Dickerman could write a letter to those people tell them stop using the tape of showing his face.
All right. Were you the one then who took her to Bill Dickerman?
Yes, I did.
And was the purpose for that to get her child off television?
Yes.
Was there any other reason that you took her to Bill Dickerman?
No, that was the reason we took her. Because didn't want to be. Her child be called fag or whatever was calling.
Objection leading, but they probably can't hear me. Next, did someone physically abuse the accuser's mother?
With regards to your conveying that comment about a person prepared to give her money, what did she say?
She said, no, tell them all I need friend. I don't need money. I just need pray. And I don't need money. Thank you very much. But tell them we need a friend. That's all we need. And I say, you sure you don't need money? If you need any money, let me know.
Objection, non-responsive.
I'll strike the last sentence.
When did this conversation take place? Now, I know your difficulties with dates, but in comparison to some other time.
After Martin Bashir.
Do you know if Janet was still with David at the time of that conversation?
No. Martin Bashir happened. David, they were separated. No, they were not together.
Did you ever see Janet with bruises on her?
Yes, I did.
Do you know where those bruises were on her body?
One time I saw bruises upper, nearby by her neck, near upper chest. Like somebody tried to, what they call, I don't know what was it. Looked like somebody tried to choke her or something. Or there was makeup on it and the makeup was coming off. And I said, what is this? She'd hide it. She didn't want to let me know.
Objection, non-responsive.
I'll strike after he, and there was makeup on it. From there on, I'll strike.
Did you see bruises on any other occasion on her?
Yes, I did.
How many occasions do you think?
Another time I saw bruises it was on one side of her face was swollen and her eyes were swollen. It was like black and blue. Again, makeup was on it.
All right, Ricky, Mesereau seems to be a little slow on the trigger on these objections. Now, Jimmy Masada gets to opine about how he thought the bruises got there, among other things.
Yes, it looked like she was, choked, strangled.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. The reality is this is really bad testimony for the defense. Very good testimony for the prosecution because their whole thing is about David is the bad guy, David was the abuser. Gavin and the children have talked about the fact their father beat their mother.
David, bad guy, but this, Howard, makes me wonder, with all the testimony we've had about what the mom did, what she thought, how she felt, is the prosecution trying to get out of calling the mom, perhaps?
Well, first of all, they're getting evidence and they should never get in through this witness. I think they have to call the mom regardless, but there'll be a different picture painted of her, just as if and when Mesereau ever calls David, David gets on the stand with a bad guy, liar, extortionist label on him before the jury ever sees him. More important, with this testimony, however, it's just the first time someone other than family members have brought up false imprisonment, being held against their will. This witness seems like an honest, sincere witness.
Well, we had Palanker who brought it up, too. She wasn't.
But Palanker was more vulnerable. He does not seem very vulnerable.
He doesn't seem that way. When we get in his cross-examination, boy, does he not seem vulnerable. Now we learn how Michael Jackson and the accuser first met.
It was your idea to introduce the to Michael Jackson, correct?
No, it wasn't my idea.
Was it Gavin's idea?
It was Gavin's idea.
Okay, and because Gavin asked you, you called Neverland, correct?
I was encouraging to it.
Yes.
And he asked me, he was watching TV, he said, Michael is my idol. How can I meet him? Can you arrange it? And at that point, I want to say, I'll make a wish come true. Yeah, I could do anything. You want me to help? I'll help. And I want to encourage him, eat, eat, eat. I say, yeah, I'll go do it. I'll go do it.
And you told the Santa Barbara Sheriff's in your telephone, you told the district attorney investigator in December of 2003 that you did it because Michael does good stuff for kids, right?
I believe so. Did I say that? If I said it, I believe.
Well, I can show you the transcript.
No, I'm sure I did.
Okay, okay. And was it your understanding that you were the first person to make any contact between the and Michael Jackson?
No way. I do not know who was the first contact, the first person. God knows who did. Maybe Michael just watched the TV and felt good in his heart. He called him. I have no idea.
To this day, you have never met Michael Jackson?
No, this is the first time I've seen him. How are you?
Interesting. Didn't want to take responsibility for putting the two together. I don't know what that's about. But righting a wrong or milking a cash cow, defense attorney Tom Mesereau wants the answer.
You testified that you thought someone had made millions of dollars on the Bashir documentary, but that the family had gotten nothing, right?
Yes, I did.
And you didn't think that was right, correct?
That was right?
You didn't think that was right.
No, my whole thing was I saw they exploiting some underprivileged, underaged people, that people in the media made a fortune out of that documentary. That was my personal belief. And they showed this poor kid's face on that documentary. And the kids in the school calling him faggot. I thought that was unfair.
Right.
That was not further.
You thought that Bashir did an injustice?
I thought that Bashir did injustice.
Right, and you told Janet
Yeah.
that she should go to a lawyer because they're making millions and your family is getting nothing?
No.
Well, that's certainly what you suggested earlier, wasn't it?
No, you got to listen to me or read it back, what I said, okay?
Okay.
What I said, I want to stop the people calling him names.
Uh-huh.
I did not say anything about money or anything. Don't bring that up. We're talking about what was injustice was done. He used that and showed his picture on the TV, every newspaper, every print media, from electronic to, print media, they all have his picture. I said that was very unfair. I want to stop that because I didn't want the kid go to the gas station, the guy in gas station say, here is that faggot, he slept with Michael. I didn't want that happen to any of my kids. And I think that's injustice.
Howard, aside from the crux of this testimony, a witness in control of this examination.
Here's what this witness does. He's a credible witness for sure. He bolsters the credibility of Gavin. He bolsters the credibility of the mother who's yet to testify. And he has a negative impact on Mr. Mesereau's credibility in front of that jury. He definitely controlled that examination.
He's the protector of the child.
Yeah.
He really assumes a role that jurors will want to believe him.
Absolutely, but he does shy away, curiously to me, from being responsible for the introduction of the accuser and Michael Jackson. Not sure
what's that about?
I'm not sure what that's about. Well, when we return, I'll tell you what we're going to be about. What's a day of testimony without a little Jesus juice?
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. Flight attendant Cynthia Ann Bell is called to the stand, the second of two flight attendants. She tells Assistant District Attorney Gordon Auchincloss why some things just go better with, well, Diet Coke anyway. Here's what the jury heard according to the courtroom transcripts.
On the flight from Miami to Santa Barbara, did you serve Michael Jackson any alcoholic beverages?
Yes, I did.
Was there anything peculiar about the means or method that you served him alcoholic beverages?
Yes.
All right, tell us what you mean by that.
Well, Mr. Jackson is a very private drinker. I went ahead and initiated serving him in a Diet Coke can.
How many times in total have you flown where you were a corporate flight attendant for Mr. Jackson?
Probably about 3.
Was that with extra jet each time?
No, sir, it wasn't. I flew him with Pacific Jet once prior.
Were you previously employed with Pacific Jet?
As a contract flight attendant.
Was that before you worked for Extra Jet?
Yes, as a full-time flight attendant, yes.
Why did you serve Mr. Jackson alcohol in a Diet Coke can?
A couple of different reasons. I serve other clients that way also. Why?
Yes.
Because he was a private drinker.
Whose idea was it?
It was mine.
And he's not the only private drinker, apparently, but is the can half empty or half full?
During this flight, how much of the time, if you can recall, did Mr. Jackson have a drink at his seat?
An alcoholic beverage or?
Yes, that's what I mean. I should have been more specific.
Okay. The can was always there, where he was in club seating and had an actual holder for the can. The can was always present. I would refill the can whether or not he was drinking the beverage, consuming it the entire time. The drink was always there is, I guess, what I'm trying to maintain.
During this flight, did you ever see Mr. Jackson share his can of wine with anyone else?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Now, one of the good things about this testimony for the defense, even though it comes through the prosecution, is that she says it's her idea to put it in the Coke can.
It destroys their theory, that Michael Jackson put wine or vodka in the can and was going to feed it to the kids, but didn't want to be detected. I don't really understand I don't really understand what the purpose of putting this witness on was.
Don't you think they got surprised? I can't imagine that they thought she was going to testify exactly in this manner, and she likes Michael Jackson.
But let's keep in mind that in another part of her testimony, she says that the reason why she got the idea for putting it in the Coke can is because she had seen Michael Jackson on another flight that she served with it in with alcohol in a plastic mug, and that somebody, not Michael Jackson, but somebody told her that that's how he preferred it. So it's not entirely bad for the prosecutor.
It was not entirely bad for the prosecutor, but it does look like a bit of a surprise.
It does. I grant you that. And is that going to serve this defense team well? Well, speaking of serving, who's serving whom? That's the question that Tom Mesereau wants answered on cross-examination.
Now, how many times do you think you've flown with Michael Jackson?
I believe 3, no more than 6.
And in none of the flights that you shared with Michael Jackson, let me rephrase that. At no time on any flight you've been on with Michael Jackson have you ever seen him share wine with any child, correct?
That is correct.
You've never seen Michael Jackson share a Diet Coke can with wine with any child, correct?
That is correct.
You never saw the children drinking from a Diet Coke can with alcohol at any time, right?
That is correct.
You never saw those children drinking from a Diet Coke can with wine, correct?
That is correct.
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled. The answer is in. Next question.
Objection, that answer hurts me. That's
right.
what he should have said. Yeah.
This is great for the defense, and this is a witness, too. She's attractive, she's well-spoken, she likes Michael Jackson, and she looks like she thinks the kids are fibbing. So this is like a breath of fresh air for the defense, and the prosecution is saying, why did I call her?
And the issue of bias, though, Howard, because it's pretty apparent from this line of questioning and her answers that she has an affinity for Michael Jackson. Is her bias toward him hurt her?
No, I actually don't think it comes off that way. It comes off to me like she's just being truthful. You know, Ricky said something earlier, and this is a perfect example of how a trial is a living, breathing,
changes every day, takes on life of its own. Yeah.
Well, just in today, up, down, up, down.
Yeah, indeed. And
improv.
Oh, yeah, he couldn't resist that one. When we return, how would you like to get smacked by a handful of airplane food? Ew, as my daughter would say. We'll be right back.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. Fasten your seat belts. The flight attendant tells the defense attorney, Tom Mesereau, about a bumpy ride with an unruly passenger. Here's what the jurors heard according to the courtroom transcripts.
You saw one of the throwing food on the flight, correct?
That is correct.
Did you know who that was?
Yes, the older of the children.
Is that the female?
No, that was...
Was it the mother?
No, but it could have been. No, it wasn't her.
You saw one of them was throwing food.
Right.
You know what that person looked like?
Yes, I do.
What did that person look like?
Dark hair, lighter skin. It was more sort of a playful interaction that they had going.
Was this a male or a female?
Male, actually.
Do you know what the male's name was?
I'm sorry, I don't. I'm drawing a blank on their names.
You described that male as very rude, correct?
Absolutely, very rude.
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
And tell the jury what you mean by rude.
The individual was unusually rude, just courteous, very... I remember him talking about, I got this watch from Michael, and it's really expensive, and just altogether just not... just loud, obnoxious, like, serve me my food, this isn't warm, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And he was just unintelligent. It was embarrassing to have him on board, actually.
Tad arrogance there from this flight attendant, perhaps. But now something that occurred to me, I don't know if you all caught this, the way she described, this flight attendant, the conversation about the watch, presumably coming from Gavin,
yes,
the young accuser, it seemed to me during the previous testimony that whole transaction was surreptitious and nobody really knew about it. Here, it seems to be very much out in the open.
Totally different picture.
Yeah.
The whole idea, painted not only by Gavin, but particularly by his brother Starr, is what we're dealing with is Michael is feeding the child the wine in the Diet Coke can, and he's done the same thing in the hotel room, and now he says, here, my dear, I'm going to give you a jacket and a $75,000 watch, so you will never tell a soul.
Yeah.
So it has that kind of nefarious look.
Yeah.
And here, it's exactly the opposite.
Right, and you know, there is some testimony we didn't hear about her describing what Michael's like on the flight, which is very different than Starr and Gavin. There's no doubt she's talking about Gavin because she identified him in her testimony. So here's what the jury sees from this witness's testimony about Gavin compared with what they heard for the day. He's a good kid, he's a bad kid. He's an honest kid, he's a liar. He's offensive, he's rude.
Yeah.
Well,
And
a lot of issues.
A lot of issues, and interesting because one of Howard's favorite points about trying a case that he teaches when he teaches young lawyers is about the orchestration of the case. What witness you call, followed by what witness, followed by what witness, because you're building, just like in music, you're building to a crescendo. And here what happened to the prosecution is they went up and they went down.
Well,
and
they started off down, though. I mean, they started off really, really rough. Then they went up and
no,
down.
but I'm saying in this one day, in this
They
one
definitely
day,
need a better choreographer, that's for sure.
But prosecutors are notoriously bad at that sort of thing.
I don't think they think
Building
about
a
that.
theory and sort of orchestrating everything. It's more of a nuts and bolts. Here's my evidence. Here's my witness. I call him. The only thing I was taught as a prosecutor, you want to kind of start with a cop because that's a credible individual. Start well, end well,
primacy and recency, no doubt about that. But it is orchestration.
Maybe that's why a lot of cases that the public perceives should have a guilty verdict result in losses because prosecutors don't approach cases in a way that I think they should. Choreographed in presentation.
That's right, unless they go to
I've
a good
made that offer
prosecutor
before.
school, which there are many, by the way, and there are people who are really nuanced in prosecution, and so we're just saying certain prosecutors, just like certain defense lawyers.
And that's a very, very good point. Let me be clear. Every office around the country, and certainly the larger offices like Los Angeles, New York, and elsewhere, Chicago, we all had, and even in the relatively small office or medium-sized office in Riverside County just east of here, everybody has those prosecutors who can sell ice to Eskimos, who are just phenomenal and can do what you all are talking about.
And they should be prosecuting the high-profile cases.
And I think that's a very good point. Let's shift gears back to colleague, your friend, Johnnie Cochran, before we close this show. He had a tremendous effect, and his effect is still being felt here in this trial. No?
His effect is felt not only in this trial and in the relationships that Howard has had for over 40 years, me for over 10, but for anyone he touched, James. I think what Johnny gave was a feeling to the person he touched that they were special. And I can think, as I tossed it to Howard, about my 50th birthday party. My husband was a cop. He was a police chief. My husband didn't know who to invite. We were dating. He asked Johnny, and Johnny brought in criminal defense lawyers. And it was this atmosphere that was full of love from both sides.
Yeah. Howard?
You know what? There's not much more I can say about Johnny. I get a little emotional because I spent a lot of time with him. He was at my weddings, at my bachelor party. Just the greatest. However, When you talk about choreography and presentation, as we said earlier, Johnny got that. He knew how to communicate ideas. He understood how to present a case.
All right, we'll continue our discussion.
He'll be missed.
Yeah, he'll be missed,
Yes.
and we say that wonderful good night.
Indeed. Be sure to catch our exclusive coverage of the Michael Jackson trial coverage weeknights at 9 for a sneak preview of tomorrow's reenactments. Go to eonline.com tomorrow at noon. See ya.